Rick had lived among aliens for 3 years, but nothing had prepared him for what he heard that night. The cold metal corridors of Station Theta 9 were silent except for the humming of generators, and as usual, Rick sat in his dim quarters eating rehydrated noodles and scrolling through old Earth memes on his cracked datapad. His alien housemate Kasha, a tall furred creature with piercing violet eyes and canine features, rarely spoke and spent most of her time staring at the stars through the viewport. She had always been distant, yet calm, intelligent yet quiet, never raising her voice or showing emotion. She had been assigned to share quarters as part of the Alliance's integration program, and Rick never really questioned it. Just another odd arrangement among many out here in the cold black void of space. But that night, something shifted in the air. Rick looked up when the room lights flickered twice. A strange electric tension building in the silence. Kasha turned to face him slowly, her posture stiff, her fur pulsing with an unnatural glow. Her voice entered his mind without a sound, and yet it echoed louder than any shout. "We need to talk, human," she said, and before Rick could even respond or stand or blink, she added the words that would shatter everything he knew. "I am pregnant, and the puppies are yours." For a second Rick didn't move, didn't breathe. His spoon hovered mid-air, noodles slipping back into the bowl as if the laws of gravity themselves were rejecting this conversation. His heart thumped so hard it felt like it would crash out of his chest. He blinked once, twice. But Kasha didn't vanish, didn't laugh, didn't say she was joking. She just stood there watching him with those luminous alien eyes. The silence between them felt like it could crush stars. Rick's mouth opened, but no words came. His brain searched every memory for something, anything that could explain what the hell she was talking about. I didn't, he began, but Kasha raised a paw and shook her head slowly, her voice pressing gently into his thoughts again. "Not by flesh, not by union, but by bond, by vow," she said. And Rick felt a chill run down his spine as he remembered something. A small moment weeks ago, during a system blackout. Kasha had been injured from a vent explosion, and he had carried her to safety through the burning corridor, her blood dripping on his hands, her body barely holding together. She had whispered something in her alien language, and in panic and desperation Rick had said something too. "I'll protect you, I swear it. I won't let anything happen to you." Now those words felt like chains pulling him underwater. Kasha nodded slowly as if reading his memory. "In my culture, in my kind, such words are sacred," she said. "When spoken during blood and fire, they bind souls. They awaken seeds dormant within our kind, seeds waiting for protection, for purpose, for trust." Rick's mind reeled. He felt like the floor was tilting beneath him. "You're telling me," he whispered, voice cracking, "that I accidentally got you pregnant by promising to protect you." She nodded again, her hands resting gently over her belly where a faint, pulsing light now glowed beneath the fur. "And now they are growing," she said. 5 souls, forming from thought and spirit, yours and mine. Rick stumbled back into his chair, mind spinning. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of alien misunderstanding, some weird telepathic dream. And yet he felt something stir in the air, like a current of static brushing over his skin. His eyes widened as a soft pressure pressed against his chest from across the room. A warmth, not physical but emotional, deep and ancient. And suddenly he knew she wasn't lying just then. A soft alarm chirped from the wall station alert. Vital signs irregular. Kasha's pulse was rising. Her fur shimmered with anxious tremors. Rick saw her clutch her side and sway slightly, instinct kicking in as he rushed to her, catching her. Before she fell, her body was warm, too warm. "They're awakening," she whispered. "They sense your doubt." Rick tried to steady her, but his own hands were shaking. What was he supposed to do? He wasn't trained for this. He didn't even know how to raise a plant, let alone alien hybrid puppies born through psychic bonding. "Kasha, I don't know what you want from me," he said, his voice soft but broken. "I didn't mean for this to happen." Her eyes locked onto his, glowing brighter now. "They need you," she said. "Without you, they won't survive. The birth cannot proceed unless the father accepts them." Rick felt something ripple through him again, like a wave of emotion not his own. Love, fear, hope, a blend of alien feelings that clung to his heart like vines. He looked down at her, saw the trembling glow beneath her ribs, saw his reflection in her eyes, and in that moment he understood something terrifying and beautiful. This wasn't just about biology or mistake. This was about a connection deeper than species, deeper than blood. The door buzzed suddenly, and a mechanical voice echoed. "Medical unit inbound for anomaly scan." Kasha's eyes went wide with panic. "They must not know," she hissed. "They will not understand. They will terminate the pups if they sense mutation." Rick moved fast, dragging her to the inner room. Slamming the panel shut, breathing hard, he had no idea what he was doing, no idea how to protect her, how to protect them. And yet somewhere in the madness, somewhere in the chaos of it all, one truth rang louder than any siren in the station. He had said he would protect her, and now, whether he wanted it or not, the universe had taken him at his word, and 5 unborn alien puppies were counting on him to keep it. And out there, someone or something was already trying to stop them. Rick didn't know who the enemy was yet, but he had a feeling he was about to find out, and when he did, they'd learn one thing for certain. No matter what species you were, you didn't mess with a protective human father. Especially not one with 5 glowing pups on the way. The door buzzed again, louder this time, and Rick turned toward it slowly. The decision already made in his heart, whatever came next, he wouldn't run. Not now, not ever, because he wasn't just a man on a station anymore. He was a father, whether he understood it or not. And someone was coming for his family, and they were going to regret it forever. The corridor outside Rick's quarters echoed with the sharp mechanical hiss of approaching medical units, their padded feet thumping in rhythm with the pulsing warning lights above. Rick's heart pounded in sync with the flashing red glow. The room was dark now except for Kasha's fur, which shimmered with an eerie violet hue that brightened with every breath she took. The bond between them felt heavier than it did an hour ago. It was like invisible threads of energy tied there, minds together, pulling him deeper into something he didn't understand but could no longer ignore. "Kasha, we need to hide you," Rick whispered, sliding the storage panel aside as dust and forgotten supplies clattered to the ground. She nodded, her legs shaky, her glowing eyes dimmed with exhaustion. He helped her into the narrow space and sealed it shut just as the door buzzed again, this time with more urgency. "Open for medical evaluation," the automated voice repeated. Rick wiped the sweat from his brow and stepped into the center of the room, trying to calm his racing mind. He had to buy time, had to protect her, and most of all, he had to figure out what was happening to him. The door hissed open, and 2 med droids floated inside, their sensors scanning the room instantly. One of them paused near the panel where Kasha was hidden, its glowing red eye flickering as if sensing something just beneath the surface. Rick stepped forward fast. "I've been experiencing some headaches and pulse fluctuations," he said. "Thought it was worth reporting." The droids turned toward him in unison, their attention drawn away from the panel as they ran full scans on his body. Strange symbols scrolled across their displays, and one of the droids tilted its head slightly. Unusual neural resonance detected, it said. Brainwave patterns altered. Signs of shared consciousness. Rick swallowed hard, trying not to look at the panel. Probably just stress, he muttered. Too much time on the station, not enough sunlight. After a few long moments, the droids floated back toward the door. Continue hydration, return to med bay for full scan in 48 hours. They said, and just like that, they were gone. Rick didn't move until the last sound of their retreating steps vanished down the corridor. Then he opened the panel and helped Kasha out. Her breathing was ragged now, and her fur had lost some of its glow. They know something's wrong, he said. They'll come back. Kasha leaned against him, her body trembling. Then, we must leave soon, she whispered, before it is too late. Rick helped her to the resting pod and activated the privacy shield. Then paced the room like a caged animal. Everything inside him screamed for answers. This bond, this pregnancy, the strange feelings growing in his mind, it was all too much, and yet, beneath the chaos, there was something else, something ancient. Something calling to him from inside his bones, memories that weren't his. Images flashing behind his eyes of a world filled with silver forests and glowing rivers. Of alien cubs running through misty plains under triple moons. He stumbled back and gripped the wall. Kasha, what's happening to me? He asked, his voice low but urgent. She opened her eyes slowly, the violet glow returning for a brief moment. The bond is awakening, she said. Your vow, your protection, it gave life to more than just the pups. It forged a link between our essences, and now that link is changing you. Rick stared at her, the weight of her words sinking into his skin. Changing me into what? He asked. Kasha looked away for a moment, then back at him. Into something that can survive what's coming, she said. Before he could ask more, the comms panel blinked with an incoming message. Rick froze. It was from Commander Dresk, a reptilian officer who had never liked Rick's presence on the station. His face appeared on the screen. Eyes narrowed and tone sharp. Report to Central Hall in 1 hour, he said. There's been an anomaly tied to your quarters. Do not be late. The screen went dark. Rick cursed under his breath and turned to Kasha. They're closing in, he said. Whatever this is, it's about to blow open. She sat up slowly, her strength returning with a deep breath. Then we must seek the seer, she said. Rick blinked. The what? Kasha stood now, weak but determined. There is one on this station who understands ancient bonds and soul pacts, she said. An elder of my kind, hidden among the maintenance staff. He's been watching us since the beginning. Rick grabbed his jacket and helped her out the door, moving fast through dim corridors, each step filled with tension as patrol units moved past them without stopping. When they reached the cargo level, Kasha pointed to an old metal door covered in rust and glowing symbols. Rick knocked once, twice, then 3 times, and the door creaked open. Inside was a small circular chamber lit by soft blue crystals, and in the center sat a hunched figure cloaked in old robes. His fur was grayed, and his eyes held the stars themselves. I've been waiting, the elder said, his voice like wind over mountains. Kasha bowed deeply, and Rick followed though he didn't understand why. The elder stood and stepped toward them, placing one hand on Rick's chest. A spark jumped between them, and the elder's eyes widened. The bond is deeper than I thought, he said. You are not just the father, you are the guardian of the hybrid path. Rick looked at him in confusion. What does that mean? He asked. The elder motioned for them to sit and began to chant, symbols glowing on the walls as the room shifted slightly. It means, he said slowly, that the pups born from this union are not ordinary. They are destined to unify the fragmented clans of the stars, but only if born under the old rite, and protected by the father who made the vow. Rick felt the words vibrate in his chest like thunder, and suddenly he saw images again. The same glowing cubs, older now, standing in a circle of fire, surrounded by warring alien factions, their eyes filled with light. Rick shook his head. "I didn't ask for any of this," he whispered. The elder placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "But you were chosen the moment you spoke with your heart," he said. "The moment you promised to protect what you didn't yet understand." Kasha leaned forward now, her hand in Rick's. "We need to leave the station," she said. "Only on my homeworld can the rite be completed, and time is running short." Rick nodded slowly, the fire in his blood now pulsing with new strength. "Then let's go," he said, "before someone else tries to end this before it begins." And somewhere deep in the station's core, red eyes blinked to life as a hidden figure watched their every move. And a cold whisper slithered through the wires. The human must not survive the birthing. The hunt had begun, and Rick was now its target. But he wasn't backing down. Not now, not ever, because 5 unborn lives were depending on him, and he was ready to face the galaxy to protect them, even if it killed him. The silence in the cargo hold was thick like fog. Rick felt the elder's hand lift from his shoulder as the glowing chamber dimmed slowly. His heart was still pounding from the vision, and Kasha leaned against him with her breathing steady but shallow. Somewhere above them, the station moved with metallic groans and distant echoes of machinery. But something had changed in the air, a tension that made the fur on Kasha's neck stand up. The elder gave them a small device no larger than Rick's thumb, shaped like a curled spiral and pulsing gently with golden light. "This will guide you through the hidden paths," he said. "But once you begin the route, you cannot stop until you reach the launch bay." Rick nodded, shoving the device into his jacket pocket as he looked toward the old rusted door they'd come through. A flicker of movement caught his eye, too quick, too silent, and then it was gone. He grabbed Kasha's hand and whispered, "We're not alone anymore." Kasha's ears twitched and she gave a single nod. The elder backed away into the crystal-lit shadows, and the door sealed behind them without a sound. Rick's boots echoed softly as they walked through the lower service corridor, the lights above flickering slightly with each step. Ahead of them, the guide light blinked softly, leading them toward a sealed maintenance shaft. Just as Rick reached to open the hatch, a shadow dropped behind him, and a sharp crack split the silence. He spun around in time to catch a glimpse of a cloaked figure vanishing into the dark corridor behind them. Kasha growled low in her throat as she sniffed the air. "Scentless," she whispered. "They're using cloaking dampeners." Rick opened the panel fast and helped her climb inside, just as a pulse round hit the floor where her feet had been seconds before. He dove after her as more shots rang out, flashing light and sparks behind them. "Go, go, go," he hissed, crawling fast through the narrow shaft as the enemy closed in behind them. They dropped into an old storage room filled with broken service drones and deactivated tech. Rick quickly sealed the shaft with a code lock as Kasha limped toward a wall and sat down, her breathing faster now. Rick could see the glowing pattern under her fur pulsing rapidly, her body reacting to stress and fear. "They're tracking us," she said. "They know about the pups." Rick cursed under his breath and scanned the room for anything they could use, spotting an old cloak and a portable field disruptor buried in the junk pile. He tossed the cloak to Kasha and attached the disruptor to his belt. "We need to get to that launch bay fast," he said, "before they catch up." As they moved deeper into the forgotten parts of the station, Rick's thoughts kept circling around one word. Why were they being hunted so violently? What threat could unborn alien pups possibly pose? Kasha finally answered that question when they stopped to rest inside an unused airlock chamber. "There's an ancient legend," she said, her voice barely audible, "of a union between species that would birth the next evolutionary leap. Not just for one world, but many. And there are those who believe the hybrid pups could unify old enemies or destroy ancient power structures." Rick looked at her in disbelief. "You're saying our pups are seen as political threats?" She nodded slowly, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. "To some their hope, to others their weapons, to a few abominations." The words hit Rick like a punch to the chest. The thought of someone wanting to harm something so innocent twisted his stomach. Suddenly a sharp knock came from above and the ceiling panel slid open with a screech. Rick pulled Kasha close in, aimed the disruptor upward, but instead of an attacker, a small creature dropped down, a janitor drone with a dented head and patched wires. It whirred softly and blinked at Rick, then projected a tiny blue map into the air. A message followed in an alien dialect before switching to English. "Safe. Path uploaded. Threat zone detected nearby. Rerouting." Rick stared at the drone. "You helping us?" he asked. The drone blinked once and zipped off down a side tunnel. Rick followed it without hesitation, dragging Kasha gently behind him, deeper into the maintenance veins of the station. Behind the walls and under the floors, where official patrols never went. As they moved, Rick noticed odd patterns scrawled across the metal wall, symbols he didn't recognize, but felt strangely familiar. Kasha paused at one set and touched them gently. "These are warnings," she said. "Others have come through here before us. Not all made it." They pushed on until the drone stopped near a sealed pressure door and blinked rapidly. Rick reached forward to scan the code, but the drone extended a small arm and pressed a panel Rick hadn't seen before. The wall slid aside silently, revealing a small hidden hangar with a single battered transport ship inside. Rick's eyes widened. "We might actually make it," he said. But the moment they stepped forward, the lights cut out and a voice echoed from the shadows. "Going somewhere, breeder." The voice was cold, venomous, and familiar. From the far side of the hangar stepped the one officer Rick had hoped never to see again, Security Chief Tresic. Tall, scaly, and cloaked in black armor, his eyes glowed red as his men fanned out around him. "We've been tracking you since the Elder's chamber," Tresic sneered. "Did you really think a human like you could hide from our eyes?" Rick stepped in front of Kasha and raised the disruptor. "Get out of our way," he said, but Tresic only laughed, a dry, hissing sound. "The Council doesn't care what you think," he said. "They care about what grows inside that beast's womb, and we cannot let it reach the stars." Kasha stood slowly, her eyes glowing fiercely now, the symbols under her fur flaring with light. Rick could feel a power surging around them, wild and ancient, his own pulse syncing with hers in perfect rhythm. Tresic raised a weapon and gave a nod. His soldiers moved in, but before they could take 2 steps forward, the disruptor on Rick's belt surged with a pulse of white-hot energy, blasting a shockwave that sent the soldiers sprawling. Rick grabbed Kasha and ran toward the ship. Tresic screamed behind them, firing wildly as the transport ramp slammed shut and engines roared to life. Rick slammed his hand on the panel and the ship lifted off, tearing through the hangar ceiling in a burst of metal and fire. The stars opened above them and the black void embraced their escape. But Rick knew it wasn't over, not yet, not by a long shot. The enemy had found them once and would try again. And now the real journey was just beginning. He looked at Kasha, her body glowing, her hand pressed to her side where the pup stirred. And he whispered without fear, "I'll protect them, no matter what it takes." And somewhere in the void, something ancient stirred awake. The stolen transport ship shook violently as it tore through the upper hangar shell. Shards of metal scraping across the hull while warning alarms screamed through the cockpit. Rick gripped the controls tighter, his jaw clenched as he fought to keep the vessel from spinning out of control. Beside him, Kasha sat motionless, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow, and her fur shimmering with waves of energy that pulsed with the rhythm of the pups inside her. Behind them, the station shrank into the distance, but not before Rick caught a glimpse of fighter drones launching in pursuit, their engines glowing like angry stars in the void. "Hold together," Rick muttered to the ship, fingers dancing. Across the console as he activated the cloaking matrix, the system buzzed in protest but complied, shielding their position for a brief window of time. A red hologram blinked to life on the screen, multiple hostiles tracking their last known trajectory. The ship's eye warned that fuel cells were unstable, that the oxygen recycler was limping, and that a structural breach had occurred in the rear chamber. Rick ignored all of it. Right now he had one job: get them as far from Station Theta 9 as possible, and pray the old maps he had stored in his dataship were still accurate. He glanced at Kasha again and saw her forehead slick with sweat, her body glowing more intensely than before. The bond between them hummed like a living wire. Rick could feel her pain crawling under his skin, could feel the weight of the pups pressing against his ribs, even though they weren't inside him. Kasha opened her eyes slowly and reached for his hand, her voice weak but steady in his mind. "They're growing faster now," she said. "The farther we move from the station, the more they awaken." Rick felt a rush of warmth flow from her hand into his chest, like sunlight breaking through cold shadows. "How much time do we have?" he asked. And her reply made his stomach twist. "Hours." The nav system beeped and flashed an alert in asteroid field directly ahead. Rick's eyes scanned the map and he made a decision fast, turning the ship hard toward the field, ignoring the IC warning that the maneuver was suicide. He knew those drones would expect a straight path to the nearest jump gate, but they wouldn't dare follow him into a shifting debris storm. The transport dove into the chaotic sea of floating rocks, engines screaming with strain as Rick swerved between spinning boulders and razor-edged shards of ancient collisions. One wrong move and they'd be atomized. But Rick trusted his instincts, and the twitch in his hands guided him like a ghost. As they dipped beneath a massive asteroid, one of the drones found them, its sleek silver body sliding into view with deadly silence. Rick hit the thrusters and dived low. The drone followed, firing a blast of plasma that scorched their rear stabilizer. Warning lights flashed and the ship tilted violently. Kasha cried out and clutched her side as another contraction surged through her body. Rick felt it like a spear through his own stomach, and his vision blurred for a second. "Stay with me," he growled. "I can't fly this crate without you." She nodded, gritting her teeth as her glow intensified. Suddenly the drone swooped above them and locked on for a kill shot. Rick yanked the ship upward just as a massive asteroid spun into their path. The drone collided headfirst into it, exploding in a brilliant flash of fire and metal. Rick let out a breath but didn't slow down, weaving through the rocks as fast as the dying ship could carry them. After several tense minutes, the sensors finally showed clear space ahead, and Rick activated the emergency warp drive. A low-pitched hum filled the cabin as the system built charge, the countdown ticking down from 30 seconds while the engines glowed white-hot. Outside, 2 more drones appeared on the edge of the field, scanning, searching, Kasha's eyes widened as she reached for Rick's wrist. "They're accelerating," she said. "The pups, they're responding to your fear." Rick looked at her in shock. "My fear," he echoed. She nodded. "Your heartbeat. Your panic, it feeds into the bond. They feel what you feel, and it's overwhelming them." Rick forced himself to breathe slower, to calm the fire in his chest. He closed his eyes for a second and thought of safety, of warmth, of a quiet place under starlight where no one hunted them. He imagined holding the pups in his arms, imagined them safe and sleeping. Kasha inhaled deeply as the energy around her softened, her body easing slightly as his vision steadied her pain. The warp system flashed green, and Rick hit the trigger. The stars outstretched into lines of white and then vanished. The ship groaned under the force of transition, but they were through. They'd escaped the immediate danger, at least. For now, Rick slunk back in the pilot's seat, hands trembling, his face drenched in sweat. Kasha leaned her head against his shoulder, her voice a soft whisper in his mind. "You're stronger than you know," she said. "You're becoming more than human." Rick wasn't sure what that meant, but he didn't have the energy to argue. The eye announced a system cooldown and a location report. They were near the edge of the Siren Expanse, a vast region of space known for its psychic storms and uncharted planets. Rick opened the map and scanned for life-sustaining worlds, and one name pulsed softly on the screen: Valtara, Kasha's homeworld. He looked at her, and she gave a faint smile. "That's where the rite must be performed," she said. "Where the pups must be born." Rick nodded and plotted a course, ignoring the engine's warning signals and the AI's endless complaints. Nothing else mattered now but getting to that planet before the next wave of hunters arrived. Hours passed in a blur of engine noise and quiet telepathic murmurs between Rick and Kasha. They shared memories without speaking, saw each other's childhoods, fears, dreams, and regrets. Rick saw Kasha's world through her eyes, a planet of crystal cliffs, singing rivers, and silver-winged beasts. He saw her people, proud and wild, torn apart by war and ancient rivalries. He saw why the elders believed in the legend of the hybrid pups, and why others feared it so deeply. Kasha saw Rick's lonely Earth life, his broken family, his forgotten hopes, and how something inside him had quietly longed for purpose he never knew he needed. By the time the ship reached Valtara's atmosphere, the pups were ready. Rick could feel their minds brushing against his, small and curious, afraid but trusting. The transport shuddered as it entered the thick violet clouds of the alien world, lightning crackling outside in bright blue arcs. Rick wrestled with the controls as the ship groaned and shook, finally managing to land it in a valley surrounded by glowing trees and smooth stone ruins. The air was thick with energy, and the land itself seemed to breathe. Rick carried Kasha out of the ship, her body glowing like fire in the wind, and as her feet touched the ground, the forest around them lit up, thousands of tiny lights rising from the leaves and surrounding them like stars. The ground pulsed beneath their feet, and ancient runes awakened, forming a circle of light where Kasha knelt and whispered. The rite begins now, and above them, far in the night sky, a shadow moved through the stars, watching, waiting, ready to strike again. But this time, Rick would be ready, because he wasn't just a pilot anymore. He was their protector, and no force in the galaxy would stop him now. The air on Valtara was thick with scent and sound unlike anything Rick had known. The jungle shimmered in silver and blue as alien insects lit the branches like living stars. The ground beneath his boots was soft and warm as if the planet itself was alive and listening. Kasha moved ahead slowly, her body heavy with the weight of the pups but glowing brighter with each step. The moment they passed through the ancient stone archway hidden behind vines and moss, Rick felt a pressure in the air shift. Something vast and old was watching them now, not with eyes, but with memory. Kasha turned to him and pointed toward the center of the glowing jungle, where a tall stone spire pulsed with soft green light. "The trials begin there," she whispered into his mind. "Only those who complete them are worthy to guide the birth of hybrid souls." Rick stared at the spire, its surface covered in swirling runes that moved as if alive. "What happens if I fail?" he asked, already knowing the answer by the weight in her voice. Kasha lowered her gaze and touched her belly gently. Then, "The pups will be born without essence, without voice. They will not survive the first light." He didn't hesitate, didn't speak again, just followed her through the thick trees and roots that moved like veins under his feet. The jungle was quiet except for the hum of strange energy. As they approached the spire, the ground split open with a soft hiss, revealing a glowing staircase that spiraled downward into the earth. Kasha touched his arm and stopped him. "You must go alone," she said. "This is your trial." "I will wait for you at the altar." Rick nodded and stepped down into the darkness, the air cooling with each step as the world above faded into silence. The stairway ended in a massive chamber lit by a dome of pulsing crystal, and in the center stood a tall stone mirror. Rick stepped toward it, and his reflection flickered. It showed him not as he was now, but as he had been young, angry, scared. A boy screaming at a gravestone in the rain. The moment burned in his chest. The mirror pulsed and the reflection stepped forward, climbing out of the stone like it was water. The clone stared at him with wild eyes, then attacked without warning. Rick ducked just in time as a glowing blade swiped through the air where his neck had been. He fought back with instinct, grappling with the reflection that matched every move, every strike, every scream. It was a battle not of strength, but of will. And with every blow, Rick felt his past rage rise again. The father who left, the friends who vanished, the world that forgot him. But then he remembered the tiny minds of the pups reaching out to him, the warmth of Kasha's hand, the soft breath of unborn lives waiting for him to fight. And with a cry of defiance, he drove the clone backward into the mirror, which shattered into light and vanished into the floor. The chamber shifted around him, the walls falling away as vines rose from the ground and wrapped around his limbs, lifting him into the air as the jungle came alive with whispers. A new voice filled his head, low and ancient and full of sorrow. "Will you carry her pain?" it asked, and Rick was shown a vision: Kasha screaming in a war zone, surrounded by fire, her kind hunted for breaking old taboos, her past soaked in betrayal and exile. The bond she formed with him born not just of accident, but of desperation and trust in something fragile. Rick felt her fear like it was his own, and without speaking he answered the voice. "Yes." The vines let go and lowered him gently, and the world shifted again, the floor opening beneath his feet as he fell into a third chamber, this one filled with floating crystals, each holding a small light. A single path led to the center where a dark crystal pulsed with red and black. Inside it floated a small unborn pup, its body curled and still, its light dimming with every second. A mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "Only one essence may be saved. Choose now. Your life or the child's." Rick didn't think, didn't question. He stepped forward and placed his hand on the dark crystal. Pain lanced through his body like fire, memories flooding him from every corner of his soul. Kasha's laugh, the stars above the station, the first time he felt the pup stir inside her. And as his body trembled and began to fade, the light inside the crystal flared to life. The pup stretched and kicked softly, The crystal cracked and vanished, and Rick collapsed to the floor with smoke rising from his skin. The room dissolved into stars, and the jungle returned. Rick found himself kneeling on soft moss at the edge of the altar where Kasha waited. She turned to him with wide eyes, tears glimmering in her fur. "You chose them over yourself," she whispered. Rick nodded weakly, barely able to stay upright. "They're all that matters now," he said. And the altar lit up with brilliant gold light, symbols racing across the ground as the jungle itself seemed to cheer in silence. From the trees, soft shapes emerged, elder spirits of Kasha's kind, cloaked in shimmering light and wind. They bowed to Rick and spoke in voices like rivers. "He is worthy." Kasha gasped as her body was lifted into the air, surrounded by the altar's glow. The birth was beginning, and the jungle answered with music and light. Rick stumbled back as the wind howled and stars appeared above them in daylight. He saw the first pup emerge wrapped in radiant light, its tiny paws glowing with symbols from both their lineages. The second and third followed, then the fourth, each different, each humming with power. Then came the fifth, the one from the crystal, its eyes already open, staring at Rick with glowing silver irises that reflected his soul. Kasha's body lowered slowly to the moss, her chest rising and falling as she cradled the newborn's clothes. Rick collapsed beside her, his strength gone but his heart full. He reached out, and the fifth pup climbed into his hand, curling into his chest and purring softly. The spirits of the jungle faded one by one into mist, and silence returned to the sacred ground. But far above, a ship hovered in orbit, its scanners fixed on the altar, its crew silent as they watched the hybrid pups come into the world. Their commander turned to the shadowed figure behind him and asked, "What now?" The figure stepped into the light, revealing cold eyes and a scarred face. "Now," he said, "we take the father." Rick didn't know yet, but his greatest fight was still coming, and it wasn't for survival. It was for the right to raise the future. The sun over Valtara had barely touched the treetops when the silence shattered like broken glass. Rick felt the shift before he heard the noise, a tremor through the ground, a deep vibration like something unnatural crawling into the heart of the jungle. Kasha was still lying by the altar, the 5 pups curled against her, their tiny glowing forms breathing in sync with the rhythm of the jungle's pulse. Rick stood slowly, his body sore and heavy, but his instincts screamed louder than pain. Something was coming, something not born of this world, something that didn't belong. The sky split with a thunderclap as a dark ship pierced the clouds, its edges jagged, its engines silent but seething with unnatural energy. Rick's eyes narrowed as it descended just beyond the tree line. Vines recoiled as the metal beast settled into the earth, and with a hiss of air and steam, the ramp opened and figures emerged. Black armor, glowing visors, weapons that pulsed with sickly red light. They moved in perfect silence like shadows. Wearing the shape of soldiers, Rick stepped in front of Kasha and the pups, his breath slow but ready. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Not with fear but with fire, the one in front stepped forward, his voice smooth and empty. "Rick Carver, by order of the Galactic Tribunal and the Interspecies Genetic Preservation Act, you are hereby detained." Rick didn't flinch, didn't move. "On what charge?" he asked, his voice sharp like steel drawn under pressure. The figure tilted its head slightly. "Violation of species-bound genetic sanctity, unauthorized hybridization, and potential threat to galactic equilibrium." Rick laughed once under his breath, bitter and dry. "You mean love," he said. "You mean life." The figure took one more step and raised its hand. "You mean anomaly." The jungle around them responded. the trees bending with a rush of wind, the ground cracking with luminous roots. But even the ancient power of Valtara couldn't stop what came next. With a signal blink, the soldiers surged forward. Rick lunged at them with nothing but his bare hands and the fire in his chest. His first strike cracked a visor, his second threw a soldier into a tree, but there were too many. They moved like a swarm, coordinated and ruthless. Rick fought like a storm, but his body still bore the wounds of the trials, and the moment he hesitated to check on Kasha, they struck. A sharp sting to his neck, a dart filled with black serum. His vision blurred and his legs gave out. He collapsed to his knees as the world spun sideways. He saw Kasha cry out, her claws glowing, her body rising with ancient energy. She roared a sound that cracked the sky, but before she could strike, a containment field locked around her and the pups, freezing her mid-motion in a cube of energy that pulsed like ice. Rick's last image before the darkness took him was the pups screaming without sound, reaching for him with their tiny glowing paws, and then there was only silence. He woke in a cell that didn't belong to any place he knew, metal walls that bled light, air that smelled sterile and fake, and no windows, only a single locked door and a humming sound that drilled into the back of his skull. Rick sat up slowly, his head pounding, his wrists heavy with magnetic cuffs, but his eyes burned with purpose. He didn't care who had taken him, didn't care what laws they claimed he broke. All he cared about now was getting back to Kasha, getting back to the pups. Nothing else mattered, not even his own life. Footsteps echoed beyond the door, precise and cold. Then it opened and a figure stepped inside, not armored, not mechanical, but tall and thin and dressed in white robes with a golden trim. Her skin was pale and translucent, her eyes empty yet endless. She stared at him like he was a puzzle that refused to solve itself. "Human," she said without emotion. "Do you understand what you have created?" Rick said despite the pain, his voice low and firm. "I created a family." The woman blinked slowly. "You created instability," she said. "The bond you formed was not natural. The children are not predictable. Their very existence distorts the balance between species." Rick clenched his fists. "They are innocent," he growled. "They didn't ask to be born into your laws." The woman turned slightly, her fingers trailing over a glowing panel. "Perhaps," she said, "but innocence does not guarantee safety, especially when those born carry power even the ancients feared." Rick stepped closer, forcing her to meet his gaze. "You're afraid because you can't control what they are," he said. "You want to dissect them, erase them, before they prove your system is a lie." She didn't flinch. "We do what is necessary to preserve peace," she said. Rick shook his head slowly. "No," he whispered. "You do what is easy to avoid change." She stared at him in silence for a moment, then turned and left. The door ceiling shut behind her like the end of a heartbeat. Rick sank to the floor, his fists against his knees, his thoughts spinning like a storm. But beneath all the pain and fear, there was something growing inside him, something Kasha had sparked, something the pups had awakened. A strength not made of muscle or anger, but of purpose. He wouldn't let them win, wouldn't let them decide the fate of lives they didn't understand. The galaxy could burn, but he'd still fight his way back, outside the cell. A different ship cruised through orbit, cloaked and silent. Inside it, Kasha lay, still in a containment pod. Her eyes closed, but her mind very much awake. The bond with Rick remained, even across stars, even through pain. She whispered into the void of her prison, sending thoughts like sparks through the dark. "I'm still with you," she said. "I believe in you." And far below, 5 tiny lights in a separate chamber stirred against their cages. The pups felt her cry and responded, their energy rising, sinking, merging, forming a pulse that rippled through the systems of the ship. Alarms blared in corridors, sparks rained from control panels. And in Rick's cell, the lights flickered. Violently, his cuffs unlocked with a pop and fell to the floor. The door hissed open, red warning lights flashing. But Rick didn't wait to ask why. He ran, sprinting through the narrow halls, following a pulse he could feel in his bones. The pups were calling him, and nothing in the stars was going to stop him from answering, because now, he wasn't just their protector, he was their voice, their fury, and their hope. And anyone who stood in his way would learn what it meant to threaten a human father bonded by soul and fire. The corridor was bathed in pulsing red light as Rick sprinted barefoot across the cold metal floor. Alarms blared from every direction, but none of them slowed him, not now. Not when he could hear their tiny voices whispering in his mind. Not when he could feel the beat of 5 tiny hearts thumping in rhythm with his own. His muscles screamed with exhaustion, but he pushed harder, guided by the bond that tethered him to the pups like a living thread of fire. Behind him, the guards shouted in a dozen languages, their boots thundering, their rifles humming with energy ready to kill. Rick didn't care. He had been hunted, captured, caged. But they made one mistake. They took his family. And now he was something more than a pilot, more than a soldier, more than a man. He reached the junction ahead and slammed his palm against the panel. Sparks flew as the lock overrode with a shriek. The door hissed open and revealed a narrow passage crawling with steam and wires. He ducked inside and let the shadows swallow him. The bond pulsed brighter in his chest, and a flicker of warmth brushed his thoughts. Kasha was alive, tired but alive, and she was calling out to him without words. He followed the signal like instinct, climbing through vents, crawling under conduits, every inch taking him closer to them, to the ones who had been torn from him, the ones who didn't cry, but still called his name inside his soul. When he dropped from the last panel into the main biocontainment chamber, he didn't pause to breathe. He moved like lightning, slamming into the first guard with his shoulder, grabbing the weapon before it hit the ground, firing at the second before he could react. The plasma pulse tore through the air and knocked the control unit offline. Alarms shifted into screaming chaos as the chamber flooded with strobing blue light. Ahead of him were the 5 pods, each holding a tiny pup curled in glowing energy, each one trembling as the energy fields around them sparked with instability. Their fur shimmered with streaks of light like starlight trapped in motion. Rick's heart broke and burned all at once. He ran to the first pod and ripped the clamps free. The pup inside blinked once, then curled into his arm. The others responded instantly, their minds reaching for him, pushing against the energy walls that caged them. Rick moved fast, slamming open each pod one by one, gathering them close. Each one lighter than a breath, but carrying the weight of destiny. The chamber door exploded inward as armed guards rushed in, shouting orders and aiming weapons. Rick didn't stop. He raised his stolen blaster and fired without aiming, covering himself with the chaos as he ran toward the auxiliary hatch. The pups held close against his chest and shoulders, their tiny bodies glowing brighter now, reacting to the danger, amplifying his strength. One of them let out a soft growl, and the air shimmered as the lights above burst, plunging the hallway into shadow. Rick reached the hatch and threw it open with one arm, disappearing into the vents before the soldiers could lock on. He crawled through smoke and static, hearing the station groan as systems failed around him. The pups whispered to him with feelings, not words, giving him strength when he faltered, guiding him when his vision blurred. And at last he dropped into the central containment vault, where Kasha lay inside a glass coffin, glowing with containment. Fields, her fur dim, her breath weak, Rick rushed to her and pressed his hand against the surface. "I'm here," he whispered, and the bond between them flared like a sun. The glass cracked, the energy whined, and the pups cried in unison, their tiny voices rising into a pulse that shattered the field in an instant. The glass splintered outward and Kasha fell into his arms, breathing hard but alive. Her eyes fluttered open and filled with tears when she saw him. "You came back," she said in his mind, and he held her tightly. "I never left," he whispered. But there was no time to pause, no time to rest. The ceiling shook and sparks fell around them. The station was breaking apart, overloading. From the energy the pups had awakened, Rick carried Kasha and the 5 glowing souls toward the emergency dock, fighting through crumbling walls and collapsing doors, guided only by love and rage. A final squad blocked the hangar, led by the same robed figure who had questioned him in the cell. Her eyes cold, her voice sharp. "You cannot take them," she said. "They are not meant for this galaxy." Rick stepped forward, his body burning, his mind lit with fire. The pups climbed from his arms and floated beside him, glowing like stars. Kasha stood by his side, her hand in his, her strength returning as the jungle inside her rose again. "You're wrong," Rick growled. "They are meant for everything." The robed figure raised her hand and the guard stepped forward. Weapons charged, but the pups did not fear. They raised their tiny heads and let out a single soft sound, not a roar, not a scream, but a note of perfect harmony, the kind that cracked shields and shattered fear. The lights around them surged, and every weapon exploded in the guard's hands. The robed figure screamed as her robe caught fire and she vanished into smoke. Rick and Kasha ran through the chaos, reaching the final ship left on the dock. Barely functioning, old and scorched, but it flew, and that was enough. They launched into space just as the station's core overloaded, the explosion tearing through. Metal and silence in a bloom of gold and silver light. Rick held the controls tight, the pups curled on their laps, the bond between them unbroken, stronger than ever. Behind them was destruction, but ahead was freedom and something more, something vast. The unknown future glowing like a promise just over the next star. Kasha rested her head against Rick's shoulder, the pups breathing softly against their chests, and in the quiet hum of their escape, she whispered through the bond, "We made it," and Rick smiled. Not because the danger was over, not because the galaxy would accept what they had become, but because he knew that no matter what came next, he would face it with her, with them, with fire in his chest and love in his hands. Because he wasn't just the father of hybrid pups. He was the beginning of something the universe had never seen, and he would protect it with everything he had forever.